Zionism was, in its largest part, a Central East European social democratic formation. Labor Zionism was a secular left nationalist movement. When I visited Israel in 1957, Little Israel was a quite radically egalitarian society. The contrast with today is extraordinary, but it was a society obviously created by people on the left. So that this exists is, at least that it has existed, is very clear. Does it exist still? Well, the truth is that people like my generation, the old labor leftists, and to the left of labor leftists, like Zev Sternhell and Avishai Margalit and Menachem Brinker and others, they have children and grandchildren by now, and many of their children and grandchildren are politically engaged. The social justice movement in Israel last summer, which I was spending 4 months in the country, and I visited and marched in those demonstrations and wrote about those demonstrations. Those were demonstrations of young people. One quick story. My wife and I were marching in Jerusalem under the banner that said, "The people demand social justice." And we suddenly found ourselves walking alongside of a group of teenagers from Shomer HaTzair, the young guard. That's a phrase from another ideological age. But there they were, and my wife turned to me and said, "They're wearing the same blue blouses that I wore in 1950. So yes, there still is an Israeli left. It is right now politically weak. It needs support. It's important to go there and hold hands. It's also important to be an agency of political, to engage with them in support of their project. The American Jewish community, most American Jews would call themselves Zionists. And when I talk in Israel, one of the arguments I make is, especially what I had to confront one of these all the world is against us right-wingers. And therefore there's no point, it doesn't matter what we do, there's no point making concessions, they will hate us whatever we do, and that line. And I argue Israel is in fact a state like the other states. It's when the elders came to Samuel and said, "We want a king to be like the other nations." Israel, that was the Zionist project. Israel has friends, and it has strategic allies who aren't friends, and it has countries that don't give a damn in the community of the society of states, and it has enemies who don't matter, and it has enemies who are serious indeed, the whole spectrum. Yeah. And this is a sign of Zionist success, I say. Israel is a state like the other states. It's what we always wanted. And it has to behave like the other states. It has to adjust to a politics of statecraft and of prudence, and all the world against us is a galut, is an attitude of the exile. It's exilic politics. It's not the politics of statecraft. And I think it's important to insist that the establishment of Little Israel as a legitimate state in the society of states, universally recognized, at peace with its neighbors, that would be a triumph of Zionism. There was one moment on Rothschild Boulevard. We were just walking up and down during the encampment, And suddenly we heard a folk singer, and there were about 150 people gathered around, and she was singing songs from the 1940s. And including one song that had become such a cliche that even the fiercest Zionists stopped singing it 30, 40 years ago, and that was Anu Banu Artsad. You know that song? We have come to the land to build it and to be built by it. And they were all, and it was 150 young, a few people my age, and everyone else was young, and they were singing it. So don't be too quick to give up on on Zionism.